Hello everyone, Tina here from Bittersweet Quilt Shop in Pinconning, Michigan. So this is a tutorial just on how to make the block for our compass star. That is going to be in my pattern for the Great Lakes State Compass quilt that I designed. So it is not how to piece the entire quilt, it is just how to do the foundation paper piecing for the Mariner Star that will go in each of the four corners of the quilt. So these are the items that you're going to need. I have brought out just one of the pieces of the pattern here for you. We will be making 4 units, and then the 4 units will come together then and make one block. For the quilt pattern, you have to make 4 blocks in total. So I'm hoping that this will help you go ahead and figure out how to do paper foundation piecing if you have never done it. This is an easy pattern because there's only 3 pieces into each quarter. But if you've never done foundation paper piecing, it is very different than regular quilt piecing. So for this tutorial only, it is going to be to show you how to do the paper foundation piecing. So in the pattern, it tells you that you are going to need these 4 fabrics. You need a 1/2 yard of your background fabric. And in my pattern, we have used this nice tan. You're going to need your light blue fabric. That is a 1/2 yard. And I see light blue, but it's kind of an aqua color. And then your 1/2 yard of red. And then you need your 2/3 yard of the dark blue. All right, then you also need paper foundation paper. Okay, and it's a very different than regular paper. It's a little bit thinner. It's a natural color. It's not pure white. And the reason why we use this to print the pattern onto this is because it tears away easily. And we'll be sewing through this, so it helps perforate the paper and pull away at the very end. So in your pattern, we did give you some paper foundation paper, so that way you can take the pattern, which I've given you here. This is what comes in your pattern. And you're going to print this at 100% off your printer onto your regular paper that was in your kit. Or maybe you've already made this once and you have a supply of foundation paper, so you can go ahead and print it again. Once you've printed it onto your foundation paper, this is what it's going to look like. Now, each one of these makes a quarter of a block, okay? So you need 4 quarters to make 1 block. So you're going to print 16 sheets of this paper. I think we've given you a couple extra sheets in your kit in case you mess up on that a little bit. So in order to make 1 block, and you're going to need 4 sheets. But to make the whole quilt, you need 16 sheets because you have to make 4 blocks, okay? All right, so once you've done that, and make sure that when you print, it's at 100%. If you're not sure if you're at 100%, draw a 1-inch square on a piece of regular paper, and then print it onto another piece of paper, and then remeasure to make sure it's exactly the same size. So that way, when you print this out, you're at 100% accuracy. All right, you don't want it to be smaller or larger, because that would mess up the size of your block. Okay, once you do that and you have printed this out onto your paper, you're going to cut one of the sheets just like this. Okay, let me pull this, turn it around here for you. All right, do you see how I've cut it? I have gone ahead and I've cut it right along the black line here. All right, so it kind of would look like, there we go. Can you see how I've done this? You don't want to cut on the line exactly, but you want to cut right next to it. I'm hoping you can see it. There we go. And then that separates these 2 pieces because each one of them, we will be building from each one of them separately. Okay, once you've done that, I do want you to prep your fabric, and this is how I prep fabric anytime that I'm making any quilt. Doesn't matter. I prep my fabric, so this is how I prep it. I will take my fabric, I will spritz it real lightly with water, and then I'll take my iron and I will iron it from selvage to selvage. This helps not distort the fabric if you go from selvage to selvage. If you have a steam generator, meaning a really good iron that gives it a good soaking of steam, you can also just use real heavy steam. And I steam my fabric, that helps pre-shrink it. So once I've done that and it's dry, then I come back in and I use magic spray. You could also use the acorn fabric prep spray as well. I use both, but this one I use the most. It's a builder, so the more you put on your fabric, let's say if I spray it and I iron it. I don't use steam at the second time. The first time when I first use the water, I use steam. But then when I use my magic spray, I'll spray it all over my fabric. Then I use just direct heat and I iron it again from selvage to selvage. It helps stabilize the fabric one more time. If you want your fabric to feel real heavy and a little thicker for piecing, then I spray it a second time because like I said, magic spray is a builder. So every time you spray it, it will just build and build. It does not gum up your machine. It's a wonderful product. And when I spray it, I do let it set on my fabric for about 20 seconds so it can absorb into the fiber. Then I just use a dry iron and I iron it again. And then that's all I have to do to prep my fabric. What I'm doing by doing this is I'm pre-shrinking my fabric, and then I'm putting another stabilizer back into it so it has a little bit of a heavier feel for when I'm piecing. Okay, for adjusting your sewing machine for this, for paper foundation piecing, you need to change your stitch length. So in regular piecing of a quilt, we stitch at 12 stitches per inch, but with paper foundation piecing, you want to stitch at 18 to 20 stitches per inch. Personally, I go to 20. You never want to go beyond 20 stitches per inch because then you're perforating your fabric. And you don't want that many holes that close together in your fabric because it makes it actually tear away, just like paper. Your fabric can do the same thing. So the max stitches per inch is 20. And if you're not sure if your machine is at that, an easy way to know if you don't know what the setting is mark on a piece of fabric, a 1-inch piece, and then stitch in between those two markings, and then literally count the stitches in that 1 inch. And then I'll kind of give you an idea of where you're at. But you do want to move it up from 12 stitches per inch to 18 to 20. Another tool that you might want to use, and I highly recommend it, is an add a quarter ruler. I'm going to try to bring this up so you can see it. Do you see this lip right here on the bottom? That lip is 1/4 of an inch. And I use this when I'm doing paper foundation piecing, and I will show you that later in the video. So those are really the only supplies that you'll need besides your rotary cutter and your sewing machine, and an iron and a pressing mat. All right, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna pre-cut our fabric, and on my directions, it will tell you what you have to cut. So from your background fabric, the one piece that you had of 1 yard, you're gonna cut 4 strips that are 8.5 inches wide. From your light blue or aqua, you're going to cut 1 8-inch strip, width of the fabric. Same thing with the red, you're gonna cut 1 8-inch strip. And with the dark blue, you're gonna cut 2 8-inch strips. Once you're done cutting those strips, which are the width of the fabric, then you're gonna subcut those down. So with the background fabric, you're gonna cut that 8.5 inch strip into 8.5 inch subcuts. So you need 16 8.5 by 8.5 inch pieces. That is listed here in the pattern. The light blue, you're going to subcut that down to 5 inches by 8 inches. So you've already cut your width of fabric at 8 inches, so now subcut at 5 inches. You'll need 8 pieces, and you'll need the same thing with the red. And then with the dark blue, you're gonna subcut that into 4 inch by 8 inches, and you'll need 16 pieces of that. All of those are listed right here across the bottom, right above these pieces. Okay, once you have done that, then you're gonna have some rectangles and you're gonna have some squares. So we'll show that here in just a second when I can change my camera around. Okay, so we've taken our background piece, and this piece is cut at 8.5 inch square. This piece is going to get cut diagonally from one corner to the other. And as you can see, I've already done that. So this gives me these 2 pieces. All together, you'll end up with really 32 pieces of this because we have 16 blocks. And then once we cut them in diagonally across, and then we'll have 32 pieces of this all together. So then that is all cut. And then we're going to cut our aqua, or the light blue, and as you can see, I've already subcut this one already, but I'll put it here. So you'll have 8 pieces that are rectangular, and what you do is you're going to measure over 1 inch from this corner. So from the right side, you'll measure in 1 inch. From the bottom left, you'll measure in 1 inch, and you'll just make a little mark, and then you'll draw a line, and then you're gonna cut on that line, okay? So then now you have 2 pieces. You'll have 2 pieces like this for every block. Now we had cut 8 rectangles. Once we cut them, we should have 16 pieces of that. And the red is done exactly the same way. So here's the red, okay? We measured over 1 inch from the top right, and then also from the bottom left. And then we cut those. And again, when we're done, we should have 16 pieces of the red. And then the dark blue is a little different. Okay, here's my dark blue. There we go. And now my dark blue, it is 4 inches by 8 inches rectangle. But this time we're going to measure over from the top left 1 inch and the bottom right over 1 inch. And then that will make that cut. Now remember, we had cut 16 of these rectangles, and now once we cut them, we'll have 32 different pieces. All right, so that is everything that you need to subcut. And we're gonna go ahead and we're going to bring out our pattern, and we're gonna start putting these on. Just a quick little note, when you go to cut your rectangles, and how I said you have to cut like 1 inch in and 1 inch over, okay, like so. We're gonna slice them this way. I do wanna make this little note. If you're gonna cut more than one at a time, make sure that they are all facing up in the right direction. So I know a lot of times that I'll take 4 pieces at a time and then subcut them. But if they were, let's say you have them wrong sides together, and then you did this, one of the pieces on the bottom is going to be in the wrong direction. So make sure all of your pieces are stacked with the right side up before you make that cut, so that way they are on the correct angle. If you don't do that, you will waste your fabric and you will not have the piece that you need. All right, so here I go. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this one piece. So if I had 4 layers of this sitting here, make sure that they are all in, all the pieces stacked are all facing up. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and do our first piece, which is our background piece. And so what I've done is I've taken my background piece, the right side is facing down, so the wrong side is facing up. I'm taking this section of this block here, I'm going to lay it, this straight line, this long line against this line, okay? And I have the end is covered with fabric, so this end here where it's straight across has fabric underneath it, and so does this end down here. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in place, and I'm going to take a pin and I'm going to pin that in just so that it doesn't shift as I'm putting the other pieces on here. Okay, so that is my very first piece that I have here. One of the other supplies that I should have mentioned in the last video is you do need a piece of cardstock. You could also use an index card if it's long enough, but this is just a piece of cardstock that I have. And now what I'm going to do is I've got this pinned together, so I'm going to lay my cardstock along. The first thing, everything is always numbered when you do paper foundation piecing. So you put your background piece on first, then the first fabric, and you have to follow the numbers no matter if it's this pattern or another pattern. You always follow the numbers. So the first piece we're going to put on is number 1, and it's dark blue. So I'm taking my piece of cardstock, I'm going to lay this right against the black line. It's not on the black line, it's right next to it. I'm going to say a scant. A scant is like the width of a needle. So I've given myself a little bit of space here because you have to consider the depth of the cardstock as you bend this over. So I'm going to take my paper and I'm going to bend it over, and I'm going to use my finger and I'm going to finger press this. Okay. All right. Once I've done that, I can remove my cardstock, and my piece is now folded exactly on the line. So I've done that. So now I'm going to bend the paper over. Remember, this fabric is right side up right now. It's hard to distinguish between the color of this paper and the color of this tan fabric because the wrong side is facing up. And this is where you're going to take your add a quarter ruler and you're going to lay that down, and it butts right up against, there we go, it butts up right against the piece of paper with the lip, all right? And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your rotary cutter and you're going to cut off this excess piece of fabric. Now, I just want to show this in case you don't have an add a quarter ruler. It's not that you can't do it, it just makes it a little more difficult. If you have just a regular ruler, find the side that just has a 1/4 inch line on it and line that up against the piece of paper. It's hard to really see, but what I've done is I've lined it up all the way down Make sure it's straight, okay? And then hold it really well and go slow and cut this off. The reason why the add a quarter ruler is a lot easier to use is because it literally snugs right up against it, okay? Now my add a quarter ruler here is quite long. It's 18 inches long, but you only need a small one. It could be the 12-inch add a quarter ruler. They make them different sizes. This one's just large because then I can use it for any pattern. Okay, so once I've done that, I've snugged it up against the paper. Now I'm gonna take my rotary cutter, I'm gonna cut that off. And that was just, you just discard that. Whenever you're doing paper foundation piecing, you do go through so much more fabric than you would if it was regular piecing. Okay, now the piece I need is dark blue. So I'm gonna take my dark blue piece, right side up, and I'm gonna lay it with the curved side. There we go. And the curved side of this down together, okay? And I'm going to put it, let's put it in the middle kind of on this. I got a little bit on both ends, and the reason I'm doing that, there we go. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is these two edges are lining up, okay? So right now, if you look at this, the right sides are facing each other. All right, when I open this up, I know that my piece of fabric underneath here is gonna be large enough, okay? So I have it kind of sitting in the middle. There's a little bit here and a little bit down there. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna pin that in place, and I'm gonna go to my sewing machine, and I'm going to sew from here, and I'm gonna back stitch one stitch in here. I'm gonna back stitch 1 or 2 stitches, and I'm gonna sew from here all the way down to here. And I'm gonna back stitch again there. All right, I'll be back in a minute, and then we're gonna open it up and show you how that looks. Okay, so I went ahead and I sewed on the line. Remember I said I back stitched here, and I sew on the line, 20 stitches per inch, and I back stitched there. All right, so once you've done that, bring it back to your cutting table, and your cutting mat, I guess I should say that. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flip it over, and I'm gonna go ahead and just turn it this way. I'm gonna finger press this. Now, if you wanted to use a dry iron and press that down, you can. You don't wanna use steam because things are on the bias at this point and you don't want to distort them. But not only that, you have paper on here, so you don't want to use steam. But if you didn't want to finger press it, that's all right. You can just use a dry iron and press that. All right, so you're going to open that up, flip this back over, and just put it back the way I like it. All right, and now number 2 is light blue. So let me grab a piece of my light blue. Here it is. And what I'm gonna do now is I have to bend over number 2. So I'm bringing back my cardstock. I'm gonna line it up right there against it, leaving a scant in between. And I'm gonna press my paper back. There we go. Press it back. There we go. At the very tip down here, it's pretty narrow, but this is a Mariner star, and that's how a Mariner star is supposed to be. It has really fine points. Okay, I'll remove my cardstock. I'm going to bring over my add a quarter ruler, butt it right up to the paper. There we go. And I'm going to cut this off. There it is. And on the angle, last time I think I said it was a curve. It's not a curve, it's an angle. You always want the angles to be on the outside. So as I'm putting this down, there we go, let's do this. Okay, we're gonna line that up against the edge again. All right, one of the things you can do is make sure, like when you take this piece, like number 2, and you bend it back, you'll know if you have enough fabric by, if you can see the blue here, the light blue, and you can see the pattern right here, see that? It has to be, this pattern has to be over this color, all right? So if you look at this, I have at the very end here, I am covered in light blue, and also down here on this end, the pattern actually comes back to, let's just bend it back so you can kind of see. See right there's the start of the pattern. It's also covered in light blue. That's one of the things that you can mess up in paper foundation piecing, is that you didn't put it in the right position. And then you don't have enough fabric when you bend it over. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and pin again. Let's pin it back a little bit further. And I'm gonna go ahead and sew again. Oops, see how I moved it a little bit here? Now I gotta I gotta reline this up again. Oh, I guess I didn't. I forgot. There's a lip there. Oh yeah, I'm good. All right, pin it back in place. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and go to my sewing machine. This is what it looks like. Remember, right sides of fabric at this point are together. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna back stitch here, sew all the way down the line and back stitch there. Okay, so I have made both of my units, and I just want to explain this. On the pattern, you have 2 units. Unit A has a dark blue and a light blue, and unit B has a dark blue and a red. So these are the 2 units that I've made out of this. And once you're done making your units, let's just flip this over. I want to point this out. The long side here, where we have a long seam, you want to make sure that you press that toward the center of the block, okay? So I did come in on both of these. That's your last seam. It's the longest seam you have. Press that toward your block. When you press it, make sure you do not use steam, and you just give it a nice press, and that will make it lay nice and flat. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to put these together, and they go together, long sides together. So we're going to go like this, okay? And we're going to pin this all the way down. I'm going to start up here at the top, drop a pin in there. Here we go. And it's a little unusual right in this area because you've got all of these points coming together. All right, so make sure that they're lined up correctly. There we go. And then we're going to go back to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew 1/4 of an inch. There, get the very last one. Another little quick note, when you go to sew these 2 pieces together at your sewing machine, make sure that you change your stitch length back to 12 stitches per inch. You no longer need to be on the 20 stitches per inch. That is only when you're adding fabric to your paper. Otherwise, if for some reason you were to make a mistake and you have to rip out a seam, then you're picking out very, very small stitches. This way, at least you're back to 12 stitches per inch. Also, when this block is put together, this section right here is 7 inches square. Okay, so here we go. We have sewn our 2 units together. And once I sew them together, I do press this seam open. Again, with dry heat, no steam. Okay, so what we're looking to do is we are looking to make 4 of these units to make 1 star block. So I have got 2 made here. As you can see, like you can see the direction in which we are going. All right, I will come back when I make all 4 blocks and put it together so you can see the end result. Okay, so this is my finished block. I've put all 4 sections together at this point. I do want to mention that when I connect this block and this block together here at the seam, I did take a scant seam, so just a little bit larger than 1/4 inch of a seam. And then when I put this row and this row together, I did the same thing. I just took a little bit larger of a seam than the 1/4 inch. The block should finish out roughly around 13.5 inches. You are going to trim it down though to a 12.5 inch block when it's completely finished. So if for some reason you don't have a 1/4 inch along the edge here of the end of the star, it's probably because your seam is a little bit too small. And so I did have to take 1 block and redo it, and I realized that I needed to take a little bit of a larger seam personally for myself. So I went back in, I ripped out the taking this and this, I had this row together and this row. I ripped that seam out, I took a little bit larger of a seam, about a scant, maybe a little larger than a scant, and then it gave me enough allowance on the ends here so that way when I trim this up with my 12.5 inch ruler, I have a 1/4 inch left at the ends of each of these stars. Okay, all right, that's it. That is how you put together this Mariner star. I hope you enjoy doing it. Just as a reminder, make sure that you press your seams open on the back when you come to putting all 4 of the blocks together to create the 1 large block. All right, everyone, I hope you enjoyed making this Mariner star with my pattern for paper foundation piecing. I do want to reiterate one more time that when you are pressing this, make sure that you're using a dry iron. You do not want to be using steam. Everything is cut on the bias at this point, and it's so easy to stretch bias by using steam. And then also ironing. You just want to take your iron and press it up and down, because if you do iron and you don't press up and down, what you'll do is you will stretch those seams in your fabric. You will stretch them, and that's when you can get a little bit of a warble in your fabric. So 2 things I recommend. Number 1, making sure your fabric is starched really well. It'll help kind of stabilize it so it doesn't move too much. And number 2, do not use steam. Just use a dry iron and press it up and down. All right, thank you everyone. I hope you had a great time making the Mariner Star for the quilt that I've designed. And don't forget, as always, be inspired.